What do you know about politics? What should you know? Forget views, beliefs, and opinions. Politics is really a science, and that's where we come in. Welcome to Inside Political Science. I'm Kirby Gordell.
I'm Todd Kent, and we're your guides to what's actually happening in politics. We're using our years of experience to navigate political data, media, money, behavior, and more to educate and inform you.
Welcome to episode 15 of Inside Political Science. I'm here with my good friend Todd Kent, and we are in a sacred place, in the classroom at Texas A&M University with the Bush 141 students. This is your class, Todd. Tell me a little bit about who's in this room with us.
These students are new to Texas A&M, this first semester students, and what we're studying this semester is democracy, civic engagement, and leadership. This is an initiative of the university and our president, General Welch, and so this is an opportunity to hear from students. Today's episode is all about students and what they think about this election. In fact, I can tell you from a survey I did of the students, 99% of these students have never voted in a presidential election. So this is new stuff, and we want to hear from you.
And the future is theirs, right? Our generation has left y'all a lot of mess. Y'all are going to fix it, right? So what's up first?
Well, first of all, let's talk about issues. What's important to you as a new voter, as you're looking to decide who to vote for president? What issues are you looking at? So we have students who are ready to speak, and turn it over to you.
Thank you. Dr. Gradell, Dr. Kent, my name is Sasha Ortiz. I'm a 24-year-old U.S. Navy veteran from Bell County, Texas. In President Roosevelt's inaugural speech, he mentioned a rendezvous of destiny, and that term has always, I guess, struck a chord with me, at least over, my growing up. But, at least for our country looking ahead, our rendezvous of destiny is marred by two serious issues. First one is getting government spending under control, controlling our national debt. Currently speaking, we are $35 trillion in national debt. Our national debt is $35 trillion, and we've accumulated over half of that in the last 10 years. When I was a freshman in high school, 2014, it was no more than $17 trillion. Now it's $35 trillion, a twofold increase in the last 10 years compared to almost 230 years of American history. We need to get a real hold on that problem. And right now, the amount we're paying on our interest is almost equivalent to that we're spending on defense. And I fear that we're not going to be able to meet our spending commitments. We're not going to be able to ensure that elderly Americans get their Social Security checks. We won't have funding for Medicare, that there's going to be mass austerity. We're going to see serious cuts in order to pay off the interest on our national debt. The second issue is the lack of bipartisanship. Just recently, a bipartisan immigration reform and border security bill was just killed in the Senate because someone who's not even in the Senate decided to tell his entire voter base that was a bad idea, even though there were line items in that bill that could make both sides happy. And this issue came up even right before. It comes up right before before Congress is supposed to pass a budget, and we're always, at least speaking as the son of a federal employee, this has caused a lot of anxiety. People are not going to be able to get paychecks if Congress can't pass a bill. So we need a president that's going to be able to work with both parties, get consensus for both parties, and not worry about, is this going to look good for the most, hardcore side of my party base? Get people together.
So let's talk about the debt. Which candidate, do you think either candidate is actually addressing this issue? And why is it important to you as young people? And it should be. You all should be thinking about this issue, by the way. It's a really important issue because of its long-term consequences, because the more money that goes to pay off the debt, the less money there is for everything else. That's a reality, but politically it's really tricky, right?
Yeah.
And neither candidate's really talking about it, right? Historically, the Republicans have been the one who are like, let's fix the debt, but not in this cycle.
So I was going to point to both candidates. So former President Trump just came out with a proposal on top of the tax cuts that he's promising. He wants to he's promising a 15% corporate tax rate for companies if they make their goods here in the U.S. I'm not sure how effective that's going to be, but I can tell you this: most of the highest bracket of income earners to pay federal taxes is the wealthy, and the amount of tax cuts that he's proposing is going to drastically increase our federal deficit. And he wants to bring back our military, boost military spending at the same time. You know, making cuts to smaller programs is not going to offset the amount of, it's not going to offset the negative spending that we're going to have to accumulate because of the tax cuts, because of the vast increase in defense spending. President Reagan encountered that same issue, and he ended up adding $3 trillion to our national debt.
Yeah, and thank you, and we want to get to more speakers. You can see the problem with no candidate wants to address the debt because it's not a great campaign commercial to say we're going to stop spending any money. Meaning we're not going to solve any more problems, we're just going to stop the spending, we're going to tax you more. And so it's kind of a losing issue when you're running for office in 2024. Thank you, Sasha.
Yeah, and the math of this is actually fairly straightforward. If you're serious about the debt, you do two things. You increase taxes and you cut spending. And you also have to cut spending not just on things like the military, because that's where and the only reason I say that is because that's where the money is, but also on things like entitlement programs like Social Security, and because older people turn out really at very high rates, that's not a very good political message. And to the point about bipartisanship, one of the challenges in terms of bipartisanship is we currently live in an era where it's often better politically to be on the right side of the issue and not solve the issue. It's better to articulate a position than to solve an issue. So
we get to the situation where everybody's about symbolism. They talk about it, but nobody talks about how they're going to do it, the substance of the issue. So, next.
Good afternoon, gentlemen. First off, thank you very much for allowing us young folks to have a platform to speak about issues we find passionate. And thank you very much for putting on a program to educate other people about this election. My name is Trevor Chesler. I'm an Army ROTC cadet from Wiley, Texas. And my question and concern in this election is over the United States grand strategy and international policy. Since the end of the Second World War, we have had a stake in the global world. It is no longer a nation-state idea, but instead an international coalition of countries. We've had many conflicts since then. Although none have formally been declared as wars, we have found we have a lack of a strategy to end them. With the 2021 pullout in Afghanistan being very dear to me as an Army cadet, my concern in this election is what is our international strategy moving forward? How are we going to handle the problems in the world as we see tensions escalate in the Middle East and Eastern Europe and Eastern Asia? And which presidential candidate is going to have the backbone to do what's right for the United States' interests and her people? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
That's a great question. I'll discuss it and then turn it over. It's interesting. This is one of the few elections in my lifetime where we don't talk about international issues. Everything's domestic. The whole world is domestic now, especially in this particular race. It's really, and we don't. It's interesting if you look at the most important problem questions that are in polls all over America. The Israel-Palestinian conflict, Ukraine, Russia war, these are not even in the top 20. And so what we're doing, we have a populace who says that they care mostly about local or domestic issues. So I think that it's difficult to know what's going to happen, because of the fact they're not talking about it. Do you have a particular candidate that you think would be better at solving those problems?
I wouldn't say I have a particular preference. I think a big portion of it has to do with who they pick in their cabinet. And I think I'm pretty concerned about which staffers they bring along with them to the table. And I'm curious to see how they take advantage of the whole political system as a whole, with our Congress and Senate also up for election this cycle.
Very good answer.
Yeah, I had the good fortune to be in Korea over the summer and to get to talk to several groups, the Korean Institute for National Unification, a group of Korean students. They are very, very worried, and you were in Europe, I know, people throughout the world are very, very worried about our elections. because they're worried about what our foreign policy means for them. And just to give the Korean example as a simple one, I think there is some conversation there about whether they need to develop nuclear weapons if the U.S. is not going to be a reliable ally and not going to communicate that we are a reliable ally to them. So it's an incredibly difficult situation for our foreign partners, but also in terms of trying to figure out where the candidates are, because this has not played the kind of role that we would like to see it play in the campaign today.
The rest of the world is very nervous that the United States is going to lose interest in the rest of the world. And so I think that this is going to be a big issue, and I really did like your answer. They're talking about how it depends who are they going to bring to the cabinet with them, who's going to be the advisors. They're going to, because they're not that interested in international affairs right now, but who are they going to bring to the table? So thank you for that.
Thank you very much.
Great question.
Howdy, my name is Alexander Burke. I am from Crockett, Texas, and I am a freshman at Bush School studying international affairs. Today I wanted to talk about one of the lesser commonly known or kind of talked about facts on our poll, and that was crime. Recently we're seeing a lot more increased crime, whether that be petty crime or even more petty crime or large crime. It's just seemed to be increasing more across the nation, whether that be due to the judiciary system in general or just maybe prosecutors. It is a problem that needs to be talked about because it's creating more of an unsafe environment. So I think that's something that we need to talk about more in this political race that we haven't.
What do you think the candidates are saying about crime? Are they addressing it?
I'd say there's less of concern on crime than other aspects. One of the big aspects you have today is talking about identities and whatnot, and that's great, but we also need to focus on crime because in the end of the day, our safety comes down to how the criminal justice system is handled. And if we don't handle it well, it could be very bad.
So there are several issues, right? One of them is the question about whether crime is increasing or decreasing. Some of the statistics coming out of the federal government suggest that it's going down over time, but that's not always. It's kind of like the economy in this sense, that the economy can be better overall by objective indicators, but maybe it's not better everywhere, and maybe it's uneven in terms of how it's performing, and maybe it's affecting certain people more than others. For example, the economy. So I think that's the issue with crime, is that it's uneven in terms of how it's being experienced and how it's being felt, and the people who are experiencing it are very much concerned about crime and very much concerned about law and order. And the most that it's been talked about is really when I think Donald Trump has tried to connect it to immigration-related issues instead of more of a general strategy about keeping communities safe.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Howdy, my name is Miles McKee. I am a cadet originally from Madison, Mississippi, but I've lived in San Antonio, Texas for the past 8 years. The issue I think to be the greatest one in the U.S. right now is the stunning lack of accountability for politicians' actions. We can dole out money to all these other countries, appropriate it however we want, and it doesn't really get talked about. It just, a lot of these politicians fancy themselves to be global kingmakers instead of constituents for their, representatives for their constituents. There is, we have current candidates right now who were just installed. They were never elected. We saw it in 2016 with some shady actions in the primaries. We saw some of it in 2020, and we're seeing a lot of it now in 2024. How would it be possible to get politicians back in touch with the people who elect them?
That's a great question. If we think about the idea of a representative, that's what we're electing, somebody to represent our interest. But we have to care, and as we've talked about in this class before, we have to stay informed, to pay the time cost to know what's going on, so that we can hold them accountable. I think if we don't shed the light on our political system, then it can operate in the darkness. And I think that's what you're talking about, is that the ability to do that without any repercussions from it.
Yeah, and let me push back just a little, and I don't disagree with your general point about the lack of accountability, but I like to argue that we get the government we deserve, and so we're governed badly. And the reason we get because ultimately the government we elect does reflect us. And that can be because we're not paying enough attention and we're not holding people accountable. It can be because we're not engaged enough. It can be because we're not involved enough. It can be because we're making bad decisions when we go to the ballot box. But ultimately, in a representative democracy, the representation's not going to be perfect. It's not going to fit perfectly into what people want all the time, but it tends to represent. There's a reason why we have these two candidates, right? There was political pressure, even on the Kamala Harris side, on the Democratic side, even though she didn't run through the primaries, there was a lot of political pressure on Joe Biden to step down and allow someone else to come in, right? That was partly accountability, even if it wasn't sort of an ideal form of accountability.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for having me on.
Howdy, my name is Davey Veith. I'm a 19-year-old political science major, originally from Midland, Michigan, but I live in Katy, Texas now. And the most important issue, in my opinion, for this upcoming election is LGBTQ issues, specifically issues facing trans youth. Currently, the ACLU is tracking over 530 anti-LGBTQ bills, most focusing on either healthcare restrictions on trans youth, which goes against the recommendations of the broader medical community, bills banning trans people from accessing public bathrooms that align with their gender identity, despite no known risk posed by trans people in their correct bathrooms, and book bans banning content that contains queer themes, as well as rolling back anti-discrimination protections. We know that mental health declines and suicide rates increase in trans and queer youth, and they all increase as peer acceptance and healthcare access decreases. And according to the Trevor Project survey of national queer youth, more than 1 in 10 LGBTQ young people attempted suicide in the past year, and that's higher in communities with less acceptance. Donald Trump's platform specifically calls for a national ban on healthcare for trans minors, as well as codifying the language of gender in the current federal government. That is why I believe that this is one of the most important issues, because protecting the people who are unable to protect themselves is of the utmost importance.
Thank you for your comments. I want to, if you look at these are the top issues related that in our class. So you brought up an important issue in our world today. Do you think that it's being addressed in the campaign appropriately?
Appropriately? No. I think that the comments of debate about transgender operations on illegal aliens in prisons is a great example of how the right is currently just using catch-all terms to fearmonger and stowing a bunch of hate, much in the same way that Anita Bryant in the 1980s used gay teachers like grooming your children as an example as to why that was a danger to push for a ban on gay teachers in public classrooms. The current Republicans are trying to push for bans on trans people in public spaces in various ways and are using that type of dangerous rhetoric to do so. And Donald Trump is furthering that on a national stage.
So do you think that Vice President Harris is addressing the issue appropriately on the campaign trail?
I think that her party's platform is much better on addressing trans issues, and they are avoiding all of the pitfalls of the dangerous right-wing rhetoric that is being used to currently villainize and radicalize people against trans people, who again pose no real threat, and all of the fear-mongering is completely blown out of proportion, goes against the general consensus of the medical community, and is not based in factual statistics.
Thank you.
Right. So one of the challenges here, right, is this is a question of individual rights versus democracy. And one of the things you see in a campaign, and when an issue is being decided by a Democratic majority, there is no reason that Democratic majorities will necessarily respect individual rights. Right? It's built into the cake of democracy. One of the reasons our founding fathers were worried about democracy as a political form of government was they were worried about the ability to protect individual rights from majorities that were inflamed by passion. And it's one of the challenges we can continue to have is how do you protect individual rights in the context of also allowing for for some form of democracy to control the direction and shape of government. And I think that's what this is. And it's an ongoing, I'm not giving you a good answer, I know that, but it's an ongoing part of the conversation, because the question is what rights to what people in what context, and that's changed over time, and it's changing here, but the democratic component of it is it becomes a political issue and a political football.
Thank you.
So.
I just want to, before you jump up there, we did a survey last night in this class, and I was trying to get to get a feel for what you guys thought about the issues. And it's interesting. You can see the yellow issues with a yellow bar. Those are the ones that got the most votes from you guys. And what's interesting to me, that almost mirrors society as a whole. If you take the where you have the economy, inflation, immigration, and women's rights. Those are the 4 biggest issues in most polls nationwide. It's interesting to me that nobody's spoken yet has addressed any of those issues. Not that you don't think it's important, but there was obviously other issues that you thought were just as important. So,
Howdy. My name is Matthew Wilburn, and I'm from Katy, Texas, and I'm an international affairs student. I have more of a question than a statement, but my question is basically, behind you on that graph, you have all the lists of the issues that we said are important to us, but then we look online and we see debates over what race is Kamala Harris, and in the past we've seen elections debates over whether or not the candidate is a citizen or not. So my question is more, how do you see identity politics distracting from issues in campaigns, and how do we best prevent that so we have an actual discussion on issues that Americans care about?
I think that's a great question. I think politics often tends to devolve into issues that seem less important, but are symbolic of something else that people are concerned about. And so, right now we are dealing with economic issues. We are dealing with the question of America and the world. We are dealing with questions, these larger, more important questions. But the questions politicians are asking when they're devising their campaigns is what appeals to this particular set of voters? How can I use this in order to bring people to my side who maybe wouldn't be on my side initially? And so as long as they think that works, they play this game with wedge issues. And I think right now anyway, some of those issues are at least perceived to work. Where, I'm not convinced they always work as well as the campaigns think they do, but they're perceived to work in terms of appealing to a particular group of voters. And one of the challenges of contemporary politics that we've talked a lot about is politics has become much more niche and more fragmented. So when they are appealing, they're appealing not to a broad majority of voters. Oftentimes they're appealing to a very narrow subset, and they want to affect a subset who maybe has concerns about identity in one case or about something that may seem less important. And I think you're right. I think it is less important, but I think they perceive it as something that works among a group of voters.
Yeah, I think we've our campaign, at least as it is now in 2024, is less about persuading and more about motivating your base. And I think that's what Dr. Goyda was saying, that they're not speaking broadly to voters. They're trying to motivate that base of theirs to get out and vote. So if there's a perception that it works to focus on identity and other issues, we'll see more of it. If it doesn't seem to work, we'll probably see less of it in the future. Well, it remains to be seen after we'll know in November. Thank you. Okay, one more discussion about issues, and I want to move on to another topic. Or do you want me to go ahead? Okay.
So something I think a lot of us are really worried about in this upcoming election as a young generation is what's going to happen to the economy if certain policies are implemented. After doing thorough research, I found that Trump's policies will directly harm the economy. By imposing a high tariff on China, 60%, it will drive up goods that the common American typically purchases. The majority of Americans buy goods that are directly from China because they're cheaper and more affordable to the average middle-class citizen. By increasing tariffs, we will have to buy American goods, which can be seen as good. Buying American goods is a great thing for the economy, but they won't lower prices to supplement that deficit. They're going to leave them the same because they know that they can continue charging this much and profit off of it. Another thing that I wanted to talk about is how Kamala promises that she will give money to middle-class citizens, like through tax credits, to allow them to buy homes when we know the housing market is always a little bit rough. So by providing money for people to buy homes, that market will continue to grow as well. I just really think it's important to focus on the middle class instead of cutting taxes for higher-ups, because that will shift the tax burden onto higher-ups rather than lower-income individuals who struggle more with taxation.
Thank you for bringing up the economy. You can see it's the number one issue in this class and in America. If you go back and listen to our episode where we had economist Jonathan Meir on, we asked him to comment about the economic proposals of Vice President Harris, former President Trump, and he gave them both an F. I think, as a voter, I'm nervous about tariffs. I'm also nervous about taxing unrealized gains from the Harris campaign. So given the state of our economy, we really need to think through these things, and hopefully they'll bring people into their cabinet that can give them good advice.
Yep. One of the challenges with democracy is things that sound good because they're simple and they sound like they would automatically solve the problem often don't. And in many cases, they actually make the problem worse. Real politics, the type that we hope you all go out and do, and real public service, the type that we hope you all go out and do, is hard. It's complicated. Problems are complicated. They require nuanced, smart solutions. But sometimes, a slogan in a campaign sounds really great, like, let's charge China more. That sounds great until you start thinking, well, who actually is paying that charge? Well, the consumer will be paying that charge, right? And so you have to, I would encourage you to resist sort of the simple solutions and things like both candidates have now talked about. We're not going to have income tax on tips. Well, that sounds great if you're getting tips. But it may not be great for the economy, and it might not be a smart economic policy, and it might not actually solve the problems of inequality or people struggling in the economy or people needing better jobs. But it sounds good, right? And it's directed at a specific group of voters. And so, I think we have to be smarter and better about how we enforcing these candidates to be serious about these issues.
Thank you very much for bringing up the economy. Let's move into a new subject now. I want to talk about, where do you get your information? We've talked a little bit about this in this class. And so how do you go about finding out about candidates, what they stand for? Where do you get your information?
Hi, I'm Kaveen Shah. I'm a 18-year-old from Sugar Land, Texas. And I think a lot of us, or a lot of people, especially in our age, get our information from a lot of different media sources specifically. And that comes a lot from short form content. So I know a lot of people get their knowledge from TikTok, Twitter, things of that nature, or podcasts. I know now I could talk to a podcast is a big thing. People get information from wild places. So I think a lot of it is becoming shorter and shorter. And so the problem that brings is if we're getting information in small little bits, is how can you get the full picture, especially if you don't have the time to maybe go out and do extensive research onto other things.
Let me ask, so are you getting your information from TikTok?
A little bit, yeah.
And do you find that do you feel like you can trust the information that you are getting? Or do you feel like you're getting a lot of bad information?
I think if you have preconceived notions on an idea, if I think a certain issue, the inflation is something bad, and I see a video talking about how Kamala Harris is terrible for inflation, then I'm more inclined to believe that without doing further research. Whereas if I see something completely against that idea, then maybe I take that with less of a grain of salt. So it has a lot of I think reinforcement bias to where I might think I'm seeing something true, but I don't really know because I'm not doing a deep dive into it.
And as a general question, maybe more broadly in terms of where you all are getting information, do you feel like you know when you're seeing misinformation? Do you feel like you know when you're seeing AI instead of real pictures or real videos or real news segments?
I think it depends. I know it's if you see a video of Donald Trump saying that he's going to go to Mars if he loses, it's probably fake. But I think there's a lot of very real things. I know especially older generations, my grandparents often send me videos of AI generated things about how bread will kill you if you eat too much of it, random things. So I think it's very difficult as AI gets better to
parse that out, which is kind of the big problem, which is if you're being bombarded with a lot of, like a large amount of information, it's very hard to sort through that. And if you're using a split-second judgment, it might be right like 80% of the time, but what impact does that maybe 20% have on you?
So, yeah, thank you for bringing up social media and getting information. If you can see our survey that we did, besides news sites and apps, I'm thinking that's probably CNN, Fox, and others. The next two biggest were Instagram and TikTok. Instagram being very large, very strong. Does it? I know that Dr. Gordo talked about does the accuracy, whether is it accurate or not, does that bother you? Is an issue. But also, do you feel like that there's a potential to be manipulated through algorithms, sending you stuff that you didn't ask for, and therefore manipulating exactly what you see?
I think there is, and I think that a lot of people see that, which is like maybe people who lean left or lean right will see a lot of content that kind of relies upon that. Especially if I'm following a bunch of creators from one side, I might see a lot of content from that side. But I do think it has like a really positive potential as well, which is it makes information that a lot of people may find boring very, very palatable and like receptive to. So I know like a lot of comedy shows like Hassan Minaj or a lot of comedians like Jamie Oliver have like put comedic twists on information. So I think it is a risk, but also there is some reward to making people a little bit more engaged or maybe like pay attention to issues that they otherwise wouldn't have. So there's risks and rewards to it.
Thank you. You can see here that Kirby and I's generation, television was everything. I grew up, if it was said on TV, Walter Cronkite said it, it was true. And what we're seeing now that with your generation, that's not the case anymore, so television is out. I think the entrepreneur of the future, the political entrepreneur, is the one that can create social media content that we can have some trust in it, that we believe in it, and it can really, because this is, as much as we try to fight it as old people, it's not going away, and you guys are going to drive the market.
And the surveys are showing the news coming from social media and especially from TikTok is increasing over time, especially among young adults. They define young adults as 18 to 29. 29 might sound old to some of y'all, but you do worry about what type of information people are getting in these settings because of the algorithms, because they are feeding off of your preferences that you are giving to it. And here's something that I hope you all think about when you consume news on these platforms. You are the product. They are learning about you so that they can sell your data. And so your clicks, your watches, your attention is what is important on these platforms. And that changes the normal relationship between media and consumers that we grew up with anyway.
Howdy, my name is Camilla, and I'm from the DFW area. I want to speak on the fact that we're building our own echo chambers nowadays. And in this class, we've talked a lot about polarization and how Congress isn't getting anything done. And Congress itself is becoming a media circus, but we're holding that in our own pockets because we watch news, whether it be through a news app or through Instagram or TikTok, and our algorithms continue to give us more information that we're more likely to agree with because they know that that's what we're going to watch. Most people are either going to watch rage bait, which is whenever you watch something just because you're going to be angry about it. But most people will not watch that when it comes to politics if it's moderate to some extent, because that's boring. And as my former peer said, that we are now listening to media at all times. I mean, I'm sure some of us, myself included, have screen time that is well over the amount of time that any doctor could ever recommend. And as more time goes on, and we aren't self-regulated, and it's becoming an addiction, and we keep being fed the same content, we are less willing to look across state lines. We aren't willing to look at people as people, and it's really quite dehumanizing, and it's leading to increased polarization, and I think that's being reflected in our U.S. Congress.
Yeah, one of the things that we know from studies is that if you look at the members of Congress who are most likely to be visible on social media, most likely to be on the 24/7 news networks, they aren't the most effective members of Congress. They're the most quotable members of Congress. We used to talk about them as workhorses versus show horses. The workhorses were the people who went and did the work in the committee, who did legislation, who got things done, who fixed things, who reached out across the aisle and created compromise. And the show horses were the people who mainly wanted to be on TV. Well, increasingly, the people that you see are more and more, it's about taking positions, it's about saying outrageous things, and it's not about actually doing something. So if you look at a member of Congress, when they show up on any of your platforms, say, what are you actually doing to fix this? Right? Are you actually trying to do something to solve the problem, or are you just staking out a position and trying to get someone mad and to feed off public outrage?
Thank you very much. We just have a few minutes left. I want to address one thing. I want to ask a question. Do you feel like the major political parties adequately represent your views? Can you fit yourself into one of the parties today? If not, what do you think we should do about it? Anybody want to comment on that?
Howdy, my name is Alexa, and I don't think they fully represent us. And especially how Camila just talked, like everything's so polarized. And we, now as a young generation, we don't have a lot of civil engagement on the political view, because social media just doesn't push us that much, because everything we just had it in our phones. And that separates us to make us more individualistic. So I don't think we think about a community. We just think about my community and with the ones I represent, not like other people. And we can see that on how like some of the candidates really address their campaign on young people based on TikTok. We can see Kamala Harris' TikTok page. And I think that's affected us a lot too on the educational part, that like with all the COVID-19 people in the church span, especially kids on educational area, just don't retain a lot of information anymore. And I don't think the United States is doing that much to like promote or a better education for young people.
Okay, thank you. Somebody else, we got a few more people that want to speak, and then we'll finish.
Hi, my name is Ella Carter. I am a freshman poli-sci major from Austin, Texas. I personally believe that as a Republican, as a conservative, the party does represent my values, but however, to connect this back to kind of our previous question, I do not feel that the issues of the party are as well represented or specified in the national media or just the national rhetoric as talked about. We've seen a lot of opposing viewpoints right now, but specifically I feel like on that side of the spectrum, media can be skewed towards the left. With the election, Kamala Harris becoming the candidate, there's been a lot of issues there with thinking about, okay, how did she go past the primary? How did she go past our usual cycle of how we do things? But I haven't seen that reflected in media. And I haven't seen a lot of Republican viewpoints that are really presented as they should be, rather they're skewed. And I feel like there's a lot of ways that we don't balance things evenly, specifically on that side of things. But I don't know, that's just something that I'd like to hear y'all's opinion about.
Thank you. Somebody else.
Howdy, my name is Benjamin Lara. I'm from Sugar Land, Texas. I feel like personally that both parties don't accurately represent like my personal beliefs, because I believe both parties are both voluntarily attacking human life, and that we need to as Americans recognize the dignity of all human beings. And it feels kind of hard when there's so many different combinations of both sides arguing about what like has value in a human being. And I think especially now in the election, we need to all come together as Americans and recognize that past party differences, we all matter and we're all human beings, and we shouldn't take a selective side into divisive politics to label someone as an alien or trying to make someone feel inhumane, because everyone has that dignity. And that's what I really want future politicians and future, this election especially, to represent that.
Thank you. One last comment.
Hi, my name is Vanessa Tetz. I'm a freshman international affairs student, and I would say that neither party honestly accurately represents any of the people that they represent, because when you see the people who are talking and representing those groups, you see the polarized people. You see the people who are and you see it in the statistical analysis. The people who vote, the people who do those things are the ones who feel the most strongly about it. But when you look at the statistics, the majority of people aren't that gung-ho about everything. And so when you see all these politicians making these statements, they might not necessarily represent everybody in the long run. And politicians are supposed to be representing the people, and seeing that polarization is just showing that we aren't represented.
Thank you for that. And what you hit on a problem of democracy right now in America is that it's the far left and the far right who are determining who our general election candidates are. So thank you for that. Did you want to make a comment?
Howdy, I'm Benjamin Wellington, and like the previous people who came up here, I don't feel like either candidate represents me well. And I feel like those on the right are doing a good job making themselves seem too crazy for me to align myself with them. And I can't really put myself with those on the left because personally I don't have the same values that they do.
So you're saying that the parties are not doing a good job representing everybody?
No, not at all. Like you said a few seconds ago, it's far left versus far right, and a lot of us are in the middle, and we're not doing a good job of electing candidates who are in the middle.
Thank you so much for your comment. I think, Dr. Wood, I think we're about out of time. And I just want to say thank you to you students for being willing to express your views. I know that you expressed them through the survey, but also some of you expressed them today. And thank you so much. I hope that you'll get out and vote, and that you'll be an informed voter, and that when we turn over the batons to you, you will run faster and farther than we ever did, and make the changes that need to be made. So thank you so much.
Thank y'all.
Inside Political Science is a production from KAMU, Aggieland's Public Television and Radio. For more information, visit tx.ag/Inside Political Science. Have a question for our experts? Email them at insidepolici@tamu.edu. Also, subscribe to the show on your favorite podcast platform so you never miss a new episode.